Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Veterans in Politics International's panel interview for Member State Board of Education, District 3. Or, sorry, did I get that right? Am I wrong?
Clark County School District.
Sorry. Yeah, no, panel interview for Trustee, Clark County School District A. Sorry. I'm not the educator, obviously. And I apologize for us running a little behind, so I wanted to make sure we got started. So basically, I just want everybody to understand that this is an interview. It's not a debate, so please don't direct questions towards each other. Just answer the panel's interview. So each one of you is going to get 1 minute and 15 seconds to respond to the panel members' questions. I'm not going to cut you off mid-sentence. That'd be rude. But when you hear my timer, like if you try to wrap up within 15 seconds, I'd appreciate it. Also, the panel members, before they ask their first question, they'll give a quick 15-second bio about themselves as well, just so you kind of get to know a little bit about us. So I will go ahead and start with my first question. And my first question is, one of the things that has been brought up, and for me, I personally find a little frustrating, is because I have personal experience with this. Jim Jonas, radio show host for Veterans of Politics, is that I don't understand why we have to, once kids go to college, they end up having to take remedial classes again, basically to relearn what they should have learned in high school. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll start with Mr. Nair, if you would like to respond to that question. What would you do about it to improve that problem?
Well, I think that's a valid question, and two, I think that's where a lot of my interest in becoming a trustee came from. So I have two kids, currently 11 and 8 years old.
I apologize,
Sure.
Mr. Nair. Sorry. It's getting late in the afternoon. We're starting to get a little tired.
You're okay.
So each one of you will get 2 minutes to introduce yourself. So go ahead and give your 2-minute introduction. And then if you three just want to answer my question, but start with your 2-minute introduction before you. And I'll repeat the question if you forgot what the question is, okay? Thank you. Mr. Nair.
Okay. So my name's Anand Nair. I've been here in Vegas and Henderson specifically for 24 years. I graduated from Brown Junior High, graduated from Basic High School, and I live about 1.5 miles right from Basic still. So still in the same zip code, really enjoy the community, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to kind of pursue this trustee position, was to impact the community that I graduated from. I believe there's a lot of success that can be found within the Henderson community as a whole, and it's a matter of making sure that we take that community seriously. Left Basic, went into the Marine Corps, spent time with them, was Kuwait and Iraq in 2003, and just deployed with a lot of great people here in Vegas as a whole. And again, it's a matter of, for me, making sure that they come back to that community and that they're engaged in that community as well. From there, I've been in the banking and investment system for about just shy of 20 years. I think that's a very critical part that our board needs. We need somebody with the background in finance that can take a look at the numbers, understand where things are going, and then put those numbers back to the kids, right? Ultimately, we're looking to obtain this position for the kids and making sure that we're impacting the community in that capacity. That being said, for me, this campaign is based on a couple things. It's based on accountability for the superintendent and the board, making sure that the one employee that we do have for the board, which is the superintendent, is held accountable to the goals that's set forth for them. Better communication and better policies and procedures that are set from the board, and really a continued growth for the community as well as the educators that are taking care of our kids. So those are the biggest components for me, and that's why I stand in front of you, looking for your support. Ultimately, one of the major reasons why I wanted to pursue this. Again, my son is 11, my daughter is 8. And a conversation I had with both of their teachers when they weren't succeeding to the expectations that we thought they could succeed to was, what can we do as parents to help? So you have concerned parents that are out there that want to better their kids. And it was interesting that the response that I got from both teachers was that they have C's in one of their classes, they're average, and that's fine. So to answer your question in regards to what we could do to better that, I think it's a mentality component. I think it's top down that we're saying that it's okay for Nevada students to be average, right? Our teachers are seeing that and hearing that, which is unfortunate. And that might have been just 2 off cases in a whole district, right? But that's what I felt as a parent. I felt that their education was okay to be average versus let's strive to be better. And I think if we act that way as a district now and into the future, that's not only going to affect the generations that are going through school now, but it's going to affect generation after generation after generation. And so I think we have to change that mentality from top down, and the only way to do that is to have a successful board leading and showing the way.
Okay, thank you. And how do you say your last name?
Deike.
Deike. Okay. Ms. Deike, could you start with your 2-minute bio?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, my roots to this community run very, very deep. I moved here in 1986, met and married my husband here at UNLV. His family actually owned a small casino in Boulder City way back in the day. So we've been here a while. Right after I graduated from UNLV, I started to work with the school district, and I've taught elementary, middle school, and finished up in a high school. I'm a nationally board certified teacher and have my master's degree. So education has always been very important to me. What I've seen is problems, though. I mean, my husband, I think he's successful now because he was a product of Clark County School District. And sadly, I sometimes feel like my children are successful despite being graduates of Clark County School District. And that breaks my heart because someday in the near future, I hope to have grandchildren, and I want them to have the kind of schools that I feel they deserve, that all of the children here deserve. So that's what prompted me to use my experiences to run for the school board, because they're the ones making the decisions. To address your question, one thing I noticed during my time as a teacher is we were almost dumbing down the curriculum. I had seniors at the high school doing some of the same projects I had 5th graders doing when I taught elementary school. And that was a problem for me. We've also taken away a big part of their accountability. When I was in middle school, suddenly the district as a whole implemented a policy that we had to accept late work. We'd always had a no late work policy, and the kids understood that, and they would get the work, and they would do it, and they would get it turned in. And all of a sudden, they could turn it in whenever they wanted. So if they wanted to do 15 pages of math homework at the end of the quarter, they could. And for me, that didn't make sense, because as adults, we don't have that option. It's due when it's due. We've got to do it. So I think we've taken away the accountability. I think we've taken away the rigor of the curriculum. I know one of my seniors at the school I was at he wanted to be a science major at UNR. And when he got there, they said, well, because you're from Clark County Schools, you have to take a certain science summer camp, just because he had CCSD on his diploma. I mean, what a shame, what an embarrassment for us. He was a smart kid. He didn't deserve that. Our kids deserve better than what we've been giving. We're not sending them out into the world ready to be adults. All the adulting is gone. And we make it easier for right now, for today for them, but it doesn't do them any good later. So that's one thing I would definitely want to work on.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is
Mr. Rowe? Yes, it is.
How you doing? My name is Mike Rowe. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I actually graduated from Cleveland Public Schools. I was in a trade program to be a welder. I have taught middle school science in the Clark County School District for 10 years. I have my bachelor's degree from Cleveland State University. I have my master's degree from Nova Southeastern University. I was in the leadership pool in Clark County School District to be an administrator. In terms of the remedial classes, I think a lot of it, as this lady over here spoke to, there's not a whole lot of accountability in the Clark County School District. I think the 0 equals an F policy. I'm sorry, the 50% equals an F policy is a big factor into that. you're basically telling students that it's okay to fail, and they can still earn half credit. I know in some of the inner city schools, socioeconomically, some of those parents aren't very educated. They're not able to spend a whole lot of time with their children, getting them prepared for college. And I think a lot of times colleges like to pigeonhole students into those programs because they're very profitable. I was speaking to a gentleman who runs one of these math academies. And if you can improve your test score, you can opt out of those classes. A lot of times, some of those kids just need to prepare for the test and have some type of test preparation going in there. Colleges love to get you in those classes because they're very profitable. They make more money on those classes than even the regular classes because they don't contribute to anything for your diploma.
So with education on the decline the way it is and personal accountability that you all three kind of spoke to and them dumbing things down, I definitely see that. My daughter's gifted. And I've noticed from when she was little, in every book I can read about education is they learn what you teach to them. And they learn what they're exposed to. So I've always thought the idea is, instead of saying, oh, that's a child, that's a sponge. So let's teach it something different. Would any of you guys be opposed with going with a program, instead of having something like ESL and things like that, why not integrate it all into one so that by the time our kids are in the 9th grade, they speak English, Spanish, and sign language? Because they pick up languages quick when they're that young, because to them, an apple is whatever you call it, no matter what you call it. When you're an adult, it's an apple because that's all I've known for 30 years. Start with you, Mr. Rowe. Would you be opposed to something like that?
You know, there is a lot of research to suggest that children learn languages at a younger age. I know there were some international programs like the French academies. They were teaching some of those kids French. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think it's an excellent idea because children at that age are able to become bilingual. I think one of the factors prohibiting some of the students in the ESL programs from picking up English is just a simple fact that their parents don't use it at home. I worked with a lot of Spanish-speaking students. If you're doing it at home, you're going to do it in school. I think in some respects, those kids need to focus on English to become better prepared.
I love that idea. My niece went to a school in Henderson, an elementary school where it was bilingual. You know, half the day was in English and half the day was in Spanish. It was a phenomenal program. I would love to see that expanded. And studies have shown that learning a language helps you in other areas. I know I learned more about English grammar in my high school Spanish classes than I ever did in English class. And it's all about how things work. Like music helps you learn and helps you with math. So the language is a huge component. I would love to see that. Addressing the ESL, I do agree that a lot of it has to do with the families. My son is a CTT, it's a certified teacher tutor at an at-risk school in Las Vegas, and he works with students new to country. And he sees that all the time, that if they're not speaking at home, but he's there to help them do that. And so if we could have a combination of programs, so if the students are learning English, we need to get them immersed into language as quickly as possible. But also offering that to other students. Nobody has ever been hurt by learning a second language. I love that idea.
So my daughter was adopted from Thailand, and we brought her back when she was no more than 2 years old. And that was a part of our household, was to make sure that she didn't lose that secondary language. It was an interesting transition because now you've got somebody that's been listening to Thai for the first 2 years of their life come in and try to adjust. And so on the ESL side, it's a little bit different, obviously, with the different countries. But I think what made it successful for us was there was also a commitment in the household, right? And so we need to engage parents at a different level and just make sure that there's a commitment for their growth for their kids as well. Obviously, we always want the best for our kids. We're going to walk into that situation every single day. And I believe that there's parents in this city, in this county, that will fight for that better education, right? And if we can show them that, it's a flip, right? You've got to bring English home too, and we've got to help parents bring that into their households. I think an integrated program is phenomenal. We're currently running an integrated program for my kids too, and so picking up that second language is extremely important. I believe in it. It's a process that this is a global economy now, right? Like, it's not just about the U.S. Everything that's going on in our world today should prove that, right? Over the last couple of months, it hasn't been just the U.S. that suffered. It's the world as a whole. And so jobs are going to go outside the U.S. We're going to need to teach them better ways to interact globally with people. And so I think that's an important factor to bring to the table.
Thank you. My name is, excuse me, my name is Michael Yepko. My background, I'm a first-generation college graduate. Grew up in Lorain, Ohio. Bowling Green State University, double major, criminal justice and psychology. 1986, became a police officer in South Carolina. 1991, got hired by the FBI as an FBI special agent. They shipped me out to Vegas after I asked for Miami and Tampa, and that didn't work out. I've been here since 1991, and at the end of the century, I started my own process serving and PI business. The Bureau wasn't for me, so I started to learn how to become a businessman, and have known Steve Sanson a long time. If you'll let me digress, as I tend to do, and I know the panel members have already heard this story, but there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath. And there's a chapter 5 on Dr. Emil Freireich. And he was back in the early 50s, and he was a Hungarian immigrant, brutal childhood, became the doctor at the child leukemia floor, where every child was bleeding from every hole in the body, and every single child died. He basically took a chance and created a drug cocktail. Point I'm trying to make is a couple. One, he thought outside the box. I've been here since 1991. I've heard the negative denotations, connotations, comments, opinions on our educational system. As a process server, I went up to people. The dumbest thing a guy said to me, how can I be out of money? I still have checks. And he was serious. No, he was serious. I bit my lip because I was going to laugh, but I'm trying to be a professional. But with Dr. Freireich, he had two things, really. He had a sense of urgency, which I want to see if one of you are elected. I don't mean be impatient. I just mean get things done. You seem very intellectual, experienced, and smart, but you have to have the passion. You got to go that extra gear. Secondly, he had a personality trait called disagreeableness, which meant he got things done despite trying to get, likes on social media. I don't do social media. I don't need to tell somebody how I peeled my banana or other things. But nonetheless, my question, and there's a question here, is I'm doing the research, and I just want to make sure that I'm on the right topic. This Thursday, there's a school board meeting at 5 o'clock, correct? It's going to be held virtually, correct, because of the COVID-19. Now, I'm not trying to simplify things. I'm just trying to get people to think of things that they may not see. I went and I pulled out the agenda. There are 15 items on the agenda this Thursday at 5 o'clock, virtual, okay? No public comment, and even if you show up, they limit it, okay? 15 items. It's a total of $5,604,399.50 of proposed expenditures. Now, you can go look at all the items. It's on the agenda. We're not even in school. They're pulling it from funds, which may be budgeted and may not. I do not see any way that if you don't follow the money, and if you're not financially astute, you need to step up. Because that's why so many FBI agents are accountants. Okay, you got sociopathic criminals. They know how to hide their money. And they may not be criminals. They might be CEOs and they might be presidents or other people. So the question I have is, how do you intend, when you become a member of the board, to take that extra leap and to really dig into these budget or financial issues? And I'd like Ms. Deike, I'd like you to go first, please.
Thank you. For a long time, I've been saying we need a thorough forensic accounting of this district. The money is not getting to the kids, which is where it's supposed to be. And it seems from my own investigations, the money and the decisions are going to the people who never interact with a child. And that's wrong. If you never talk to a child, if you never are in a classroom, how can you possibly be making such monumental decisions? So I think, first of all, we need the accounting. I think we need to make sure everybody on the board is back in touch with what it's like to be a teacher. Have the superintendent in there. Let them know, because they're making decisions about over here, and they haven't been over there. You can't possibly know. It'd be like me trying to tell Yugoslavia or the Czech Republic right now that they're not doing the right thing about COVID. I mean, I'm not there. I can't know. So I think they need to get back in touch with the kids. I think we need to look at the money. I'm the most frugal person ever. As a librarian, when I was given my budget every year, I spent it to the penny and got the most bang for my buck. I didn't spend it to just spend it. And I would be even more cautious as a trustee with spending the taxpayer money. It's going to go to help these kids. That's it. End of story.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rowe, I'd like you to go next, please, respond.
Yeah, I would be all over that budget. I'm well aware of the fraud schemes that take place in the Clark County School District. As a matter of fact, I actually busted everybody red-handed in federal court committing large-scale arbitration fraud. Dr. Goldman himself was participating in this scheme. I busted all the lawyers, John Okazaki, Adam Levine. I got it all laid out. Mr. Boulware already ruled in my favor in another case. But I'm well aware of all the theft. I think, in my opinion, I would end all of this subcontracting. It doesn't do the community any benefit to pay, the law department $11 million and subcontract out $30 million to a bunch of these lawyers in town. That money could be going to the kids. It would be more fiscally responsible to hire a couple of lawyers on the law team as opposed to subcontracting out all this work. The budgets at the individual schools, I think, need to be monitored. Those principals need to be held responsible for that money. I think the philosophy where you give principals oversight and direct, no responsibility from the top over that budget, I think it sets them up for failure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowe. Mr. Nair, you respond to that, please?
So a couple interesting points on that side. It's a 240-page budget, right? So if you're digging into it prior to a board meeting, it's a little tough. So you've got to get that out to board and trustee members quicker. There's a lot that's in depth there. I also I've sat on the board for the Southern Nevada Housing Authority. That's a big budget to work with. I sit currently on the Nevada Corporate Investment Trust, which if you haven't learned about that one, it's interesting. So that was appointed by Governor Sandoval when he was in, and it ties back to CCSD money and school money, but it was something that 3 treasurers back was put into place, and it's put into corporate tranches. And so the hard part about it is really relinquishing that money and getting it back out to the schools. It benefits Nevada business owners, and it long-term benefits the kids, but it's tough to unwrap some of the things that was done 2 or 3 cycles ago. And so there's a couple things wrapped up into that. You made a point of I want to see the person that's going to get in there and get active. I would tell you from experience on multiple boards, I wouldn't be the one that just jumps in and changes. I would be the one that jumps in and sits and listens for a second and finds and identifies weaknesses or opportunities. My wife went to the Citadel in South Carolina, so I know you know that area. We're military background, right? We're going to assess the situation, identify risk, and then make sure that we make the objectives effective.
Okay, I just want to follow with a comment. What I'm seeing in government, whether at this level or any level, is we tend to be reactive instead of proactive. Can say that about the COVID-19, can say that about many things. So nobody has a crystal ball. But I think all we have a brain, and we have some of our greatest leaders have a vision, and they can make it happen. Not what they say, but by what they do. And as older I get, that's one thing I learned. I judge or evaluate people by what they do, not what they say. And that's really what it comes down to, because I do want to see our school system improve. I've run into some very experienced and educated people here since I've been here. I've also run into some real idiots, but I guess that's anywhere. But I want to see that, and I think really the money is important, and I certainly hope that you can do that. So all 3 of you had good answers. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Gianno Amato. I lived here for the last 39 years. I'm a previous nightclub owner. Right now I purchase vehicles and resell them. Been involved with veterans and politics for approximately the last year. So my question is, right now New York is spending twice as much as Nevada per student. So is there anything in your power, if elected, that you would be able to close the gap? Mr. Nair, you first.
I think we have to follow the money again, right? We have to identify where trends are, where those funds are being allocated, make sure that we have things prepared the right way. There's obviously a gap between what's being delivered to the kids and the level of expectation. I think that goes also back to educators across the country are paid better than a lot of our educators are too, right? So to attract and retain people, the quality educators that we need, we have to be able to identify through the budget where the money is going, and then reallocate it to the kids and reallocate it to the educators that are out there. I believe if we keep quality people, quality will come out. And so the important part there is to make sure that we are, as a board, as a trustee, mindful of where our ultimate goals and objectives are, right? Like, we have one employee, that's the superintendent. Are we setting the right expectations, holding them accountable, and if they're not the right person, putting somebody in place that will do the job that they need to do? And I think the rest of that leads into generational success when it comes to Clark County School District as a whole.
As I stated before, I'm like the most frugal person ever. So before we bring in any more money, I want to see how it's being spent, because you can't just throw money at a problem. Like, if my kids lost their allowance, I didn't give them more allowance. They had to earn it. They had to show me that they were responsible. And I feel the same thing. And right now, our schools are being funded by the Nevada plan. This was put together by the Nevada government. So if we're in a position where we are being financially responsible and want to get more money, especially some of the marijuana money that's coming in, we would need to go to them and have that amended. And I know the governor is currently seeking to change that funding plan. But again, if you give money to people that are spending it irresponsibly, it's a lose-lose proposition. So I think before we do any of that, I want to see the gap close, definitely. We need to be spending more, but we need to be spending it wisely too.
I think it all goes back down to what are you doing with the money you have? There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of frivolous positions in the Clark County School District. When I worked in the district, I've seen it with my own eyes. Unqualified people getting promoted. They even expanded the administrative positions. Instead of reducing them, they go up to the legislator and write a law that you need more administrators. Those folks are walking around making $170,000 a year, not contributing anything to the education of the students or the teachers in the classroom. When Carlos Garcia was here, I remember when they purchased books, it was amazing to me how he had just resigned from superintendent, took a job at the book company in San Francisco, and all of a sudden Clark County School District bought all the books from that book company. And when I seen the quality of those textbooks and the curriculum in those books, it was just a waste of money. Those books were useless in the Clark County School District. The materials that you needed to run that science curriculum were ultra expensive. Many of the teachers were running around scrambling, trying to get their own supplies just for that science curriculum.
Okay, so my next question is one that is always kind of baffled me. I'm not sure if maybe school board trustees don't realize this, or they're just intimidated by it, one of the two. But you guys are, which one of you guys get elected? You guys are the superintendent's boss. And I've seen most superintendents in my time in Las Vegas pretty much bullied the school board. Either they bullied the school board, or the school board spends so much time on infighting amongst each other, power grabs, and making ridiculous statements in meetings. A good example would have been Danielle Ford. And I think overall Danielle's doing a pretty good job, but making comments like, let's not have a dick measuring contest in the school board meeting, I think was a little overboard, to say the least. So how will you hold the superintendent accountable, especially since the superintendent is not elected? Yeah, Mr. Rowe, sorry.
I think at the end of the day, in an elected position, you represent the people. And you have to do what's best for the people, the constituents, the students, the teachers, the taxpayer. And I think a lot of politicians in Nevada lost focus of that. In terms of Mr. Jar right now, he has unilateral authority over everything that goes on in Clark County School District. I think when he was hired, that was a necessary evil. And one of the reasons why I think that is because of all the dysfunctionality with the previous board members. There was a lot of mismanagement with the money. A lot of these Clark County School District trustees have conflict of interest with what's going on outside of the school. This isn't a position where you're supposed to be in charge and profit from that position. As a public servant, you're supposed to do what's best for the community. If the superintendent is letting the community down, then the superintendent needs to hear about it.
Mrs. Deike.
It baffles me also how adversarial the school board meetings have become between the trustees and each other, the trustees and the superintendent, the trustees and the parents. It doesn't need to be that way. If we all realize at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want to educate the children. And there's a way to disagree with people, but do it in a respectful manner that gets your point across. You don't have to use phrases like that. There has to be a level of professionalism and a level of decorum, because the name trustee says everything. They're trusting us with their children. And what kind of example are we if we're bickering back and forth? We may as well be on a reality TV show. It makes no sense to me. When I was doing my master's degree, one of my textbooks was entitled Getting Parents on Your Side. It should be getting everybody on everybody's side. We need to refocus. This isn't about politics. It's not about anything else. It's about those kids. And I think some of those people need to be reminded of that.
Mr. Nair.
So, having the experience of serving on those two additional boards, again, the Housing Authority Board was 4-hour meetings whenever we walk in, a lot of public comment, there was a lot going on. And we chopped those down from 4-hour meetings down to 2-hour meetings, and the only way that we did it was creating efficiencies on the board. You elected people that added value to the board. And I think we're in a unique position right now because we have so many people that are vacating seats that Clark County has an opportunity to put amazing people with different backgrounds on that board that can help create some efficiencies for the district as a whole. Ultimately, again, it is about the kids, making sure that they're taken care of the right way and setting the right examples. You need a board that will be able to come in, set the line for the superintendent, and then hold him accountable to that line, him or her. At the end of the day, you follow the policies and procedures. We only just recently had an opportunity to put in measurements, true measurements, for the superintendent in the last couple board meetings. And so if we're just now to that point, how do we hold them accountable and remove that person if we need to? Ultimately, again, it's about creating efficiencies, taking the opportunity to put the right people with the right backgrounds on the board.
Hey guys, just one real quick to you, and then the next question will go to the whole panel. You said you were at the Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority group. Were you there during the most recent corruption, and if so, what did you do about it?
So there's two levels, right? There was the elected component and there was the appointed component. So I was there when it was appointed for City of Henderson when Mayor Hafen was still in office. So the recent transition, when it was us, we removed the ED. And so we identified the issue. It was a process, right? Because you've got a lot that goes within that contract, first and foremost. And so we had great legal counsel that worked with us as a board to make sure that we took the right steps so there was no repercussions back to the Housing Authority as a whole. But we did identify the issue. It came right back down to the fact that we were able to rank and score him at that time as under proficient and then remove him effectively. And we don't have that right now. It might have just gotten in place 2 or 3 months ago. I haven't had a chance to completely review that, but I think that's the key component, having something to hold them accountable.
Okay, so all three of you and every educator that's come up here said that our children are our best asset. It's the children, it's the children, it's the children. But a lot of them haven't said or done or been acceptable to any policies that protect our children. 90% of all mass shootings occur gun-free zone. So would you guys be to oppose or be for anything that would allow to have trained and educated personnel on campus, whether it be a veteran who is now a janitor but plays a secondary role as a guardian angel for the children, or even a teacher who has the proper training to carry weapons on campus to protect those children immediately should something occur? Start with you, Mr. Rowe.
When I was a teacher in the Clark County School District, there were procedures in place for lockdowns, and they had often spoke about possibly having teachers carry guns. I think it opens up another door of liability. Not that some teachers don't want to carry guns, but when you're in the classroom, especially in the environments that I worked in, maybe students get in a fight, somehow they grab the gun. On the other hand, you might have, young kids in class that are scared of guns. They don't want to see their teacher walking around with the gun on campus. And most teachers don't want to have guns. They want to go there and teach. That's their job. We have an excellent Clark County School District police force there. Those guys are trained. They have all the tools and assets necessary to handle situations like that. In terms of an extra component, I have no problem with that. But I don't think that should be something that teachers should be responsible for. I just don't think that it's very wise.
When we were touring colleges with my daughter, the University of Kansas, every building had a no gun zone sign, and we said, well, you're not going here, because that's exactly what it meant. Nobody would have a gun to protect my daughter. And the people that are there to do bad, they don't care about that sign. They're going in to do what they want to do. So I absolutely think we need to do, our children aren't safe. I did not feel safe as a teacher. There were some days in my library, I would walk around with scissors because there were students that were in that school that were actually physically dangerous in my library. And if I'm back in the stack, there's nobody there to protect me. If we would allow teachers, I think there needs to be a very serious vetting process. I am a CCW holder. I am a crack shot. I'm sorry, I'm going to brag. I'm really good. But there's other teachers I wouldn't allowed to carry the scissors that I had, because so there would have to be a very definite, thorough training, vetting process for which teachers do it. But I was in a hard lockdown where we had a student on campus with a gun, and it's terrifying that you can't do anything. There was nothing I could do. I had 35 kids in there, and there was nothing I could do to protect them, and I felt so powerless. And I think also it would do something. The kids know nobody there has a gun. If there was a chance somebody else is armed, they might think twice before going on one of the little rampages.
So I think this one's a hard one for me, right? It's a military background, so my initial impression is you want to say yes. I think there's a line at that point. I think we can accelerate the standpoints that we've already put into place. I would probably be open to non-lethal, like tasers, things like that, because I think you can secure those in a position where it's effective and we can manage to it. Again, a lot of additional training. They need to be vetted, certified. There needs to be an action plan in place. But I have a concealed carry too. So those are all those things that just bring comfort to me as a parent, but they bring a different feel to other parents, right? So I want to be respectful across the board and make sure that we're protecting them as best as we possibly can within what society deems is okay as well, right? There are definitely some teachers that are around my kids that I'm like, no, you can't, don't hold anything other than a pencil and just teach my kid. So I think we need to be understanding of what that situation looks like and really be mindful of that moving forward.
Okay, again, before I get to my question, I'll ramble on about this issue and hopefully support Frank's area of questioning. When you sit behind a desk, you have a different view of life. As an agent, I was on the street, so I got to see the wonderful criminals and other characters in Vegas from a different perspective. You go to Washington, D.C., become management. They used to say you get your ticket punched at the slug farm. So it's going to be different, and I totally agree with you, Ms. Deike, to get out. Get out and see things, okay? Get out there and connect. But concerning the firearm issue, you remember the story about Chris Kyle, American Sniper? What did his father say to him and his brother at the table when he was raising them in Texas? Well, he said, you're right. Well, he said, you're a shepherd, you're sheep, or you're a wolf. And he says, you're not going to be weak, meaning a sheep, unfortunately. You're not going to be a wolf, preying on other people. You're going to be the shepherd, and I'm going to teach my boys to be a shepherd. So in my law enforcement career, even though we're talking about firearms in a high school, there's all kinds of ways to conceal it up a dress, to put it on an ankle holster, to not force teachers to do it, but to realize that if you believe for 1 second that the police are out there to protect and serve, safety is a facade, okay? Constitutionally, U.S. Constitution, you have a constitutional expectation of a police response. We know the police can't be everywhere. I would go around a corner, and as soon as I did, some guy robbed the 7-Eleven. And I thought, wow, he's in my area for that shift, and I couldn't stop it. Well, you can't, but you can respond, and respond professionally. So it is a very touchy issue. But my question is how else do you think that we, other than the non-lethal means, how else can we fortify our schools to give them the perception of safety, whatever age, K to 12, correct? With your position on the board, without offending the liberals in the gun-free zones. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Nair, why don't you respond first?
Sure. I think first and foremost, providing education around what those plans are. Like one of the things that happened in my kids' school is they asked us who has a concealed carry, right? And so as a parent, they asked us who has a concealed carry, who has the ability, who has had background in the military, those kind of things. And so my immediate response was, why do you want to know? Like, that's my business and my business alone. And so when I talked to the principal and the rest of the administrative staff, it was more so for the fact that, like, hey, if we needed to call in a response unit, if we needed to say, hey, which parents are close, there's an emergency, we just need some support, who can we turn to? Right? And so that gave me a level of understanding of what they're doing. And I think we don't have any plans like that in place. And I'm sure they can correct me if I'm wrong on this. They have spent time in CCSD more so than I have. And so I think educating them on that is important, educating the parents on what those techniques and tools are, and then getting them involved in the safety is extremely important as well, within liability, reasonable components and things like that. And then just looking for what taking a look at history and seeing what the issues were, where the breakdowns were to cause these mass shootings, to cause these issues, and then providing more and more balanced approaches to them, right? We need to be able to address this threat in this manner with these people. And then we need to escalate that in a certain period of time and with a certain amount of security to it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nair. Mr. Rowe, would you go next? Answer?
I think it's being planned and prepared. I remember when I participated in the lockdowns and CCSD, everything ran very smoothly. I understand that cops can't be everywhere. But on the other hand, how do you control 300,000 students? The probability that something could happen, it could happen any day. We can be planned, we can be prepared, we can have school police, we can have those school police officers armed. If you have some kid that has a mental breakdown and decides to bring a gun to school, you got a real issue. And you can't infringe upon people's constitutional rights. Of course, people have a constitutional right to have a gun, but they also have constitutional rights not to be searched without, probable cause. So it's a tough line, but I think it just boils down to education, being prepared. And I know me as a teacher, I always try to identify those students who I thought might be having an issue. Sometimes, you can be proactive instead of reactive. Try and figure out what's going on with some of those kids that are angry or having problems at home. Sometimes kids just need someone to talk to.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Deike? That's good.
Before we talked about being proactive versus reactive. And at the high school I was at, because that's my most recent frame of reference, we had to be reactive all the time because we were never proactive. There were probably 50 to 60 exits on that building that were always unlocked. There was constant access. Students could come and go as they please, so anybody could be coming in one of those unmonitored doors with a weapon. We need to tighten that up. We need to lock that down. We can have very specific entrances. Yes, all the exits for if there's an emergency, but very, very specific entrances where the students come in. There should be a consequence if they violate that by letting their friend in the side door. When my children were first at their high school, it took an act of Congress and a blessing from the Pope to get them out for a dentist appointment. And by the time my youngest graduated, they had students coming on from other schools. It was just wide open. Anything could have happened. So we need to absolutely be proactive and lock it down. And I also agree that the educating the educators to look for those signs, to know how to help some of those kids and different ways they can communicate. But if the first thing we have to do though is tighten our borders.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Deike. I appreciate it. We're just watching our time here.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so my next question is, if we got 1,000 students and they were all in a race, and there were 100 kids left behind, those extra students need time to catch up. So what are you guys' thoughts of having a 4-day weekend for students that are already high achievers, and keeping a 5-day school week for students that need help with their language, grades, and disciplinary infractions? Mr. Rowe, you can answer first.
We tried a program like that before. It was very similar. It wasn't related to what you're asking. But I think those 100 students that are left behind might view that extra day as kind of like a punishment. And then you would kind of be singling them out because the other 900 kids would know that those kids didn't perform well. I think probably some weekend tutoring would be better, something to that effect. But I just think you make those 100 kids feel bad about the situation. They don't want to be identified as being left behind. Obviously, they need extra help. But sometimes kids who are really struggling in school don't want to be identified. It's embarrassing. Obviously, we want to try and help all the kids as best as we can. But in that particular, scenario, that
I think that's a very interesting and valid thing to think about, because with seniors in high school, if they're up on their credits, they get early outs. So, and if they didn't get an early out for some reason, maybe they had 3 periods of student aid. There was no reason for them to be there. They could have been out in the real world with a job or contributing some other way. So I think that would be one very valid way to look at it. Like my son is a certified teacher tutor. So if we have some of those extra people in there too. And I think there's a way to present this that it doesn't seem necessarily like a punishment, but hey, if you work really hard and you're getting ahead, then you get this benefit of whatever it is. So I think it's all in the presentation.
So I think back to when I was a basic, and if I was presented with that situation, if I was on both sides of that house, I think if I'm a successful student and I'm doing well, my hope is that I would be well enough to go and help other people, right, as a student. And so to create a community of success, that's one way to address it, is you turn it back around and say, hey, look, we're not giving you a day off, but we're asking you to come and help your fellow students, right? And if I was on the flip side of that, you might get a little pushback from me, right? Because I want to be successful, or maybe I'm okay with it. We were talking about this earlier. Myself and my brother are 2 very different people. Went to the same schools, graduated 5 years apart, and his experience at Basic was very different than mine. So if I look at it from who he was as an individual, would people be willing to come along, help him to be successful? I think there was people in his life that would do that. And I think there was educators that would do that. And I think there's students that would do that. So rather than necessarily turning the successful ones loose, let's ask them to help their community be a little bit more successful and bring students alongside of them.
Okay, Mr. Nair, thank you. So that's going to be all the questions we have for you 3. So can you guys do me a favor? We're running a little tight on time. I want to make sure that this large panel gets in here and gets started on time, or candidates. So can each one of you give a minute and a half? Just give contact information, how they can get involved with your campaign. We do understand with all the stuff that's going on right now, it's hard to campaign. So please make sure you give all your contact information. Mr. Nair, you'll go first.
Sure. So Facebook is easy. There's not a lot of Anand Nairs out there. It's ANAND. Last name is N as in November, AIR as in Romeo. Phone number is actually 702-845-1308. You can call me on my cell phone. I had a lot of great conversations with some of the principals and vice principals over the last couple of weeks, which I love. And I would leave you with this. Again, it comes down to accountability for the superintendent, who is our employee. It comes down to better policies and procedures for our boards. And it really comes down to continued growth for our children and our communities. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Deike.
Thank you. The spelling my last name, you could probably pull me up very easily. It's D like David, E-I-K-E. First name Kari, K-A-R-I. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and have a website, so you can probably just Google search those. I just want to say I'm not a politician, and that probably came through. I'm not here for me. I was an educator for so many years. I'm still constantly volunteering in schools with children because that's where my passion lies. And so if that's where your passion is, then I would appreciate your support greatly. So thank you.
Mr. Rowe.
My name is Mike Rowe. You can email me at vegasm@icloud.com. You can also call me 702-379-4850. You can also locate me on Facebook. I spend a lot of time in the chat rooms. I'm very popular on there, unfortunately. But I hope people will consider voting for me. I think I have a lot to offer to the Clark County School District.
Okay, thank you. At this time, that concludes our panel interview for Trustee Clark County School District B. Thank all of you three very much for coming in. I know it's not the easiest process, but thank you for doing it, and good luck to all three of you.
Thank you.